Okay, thank you very much. To all you people leaving, I know your names. No, let's, last talk of the day. All right, everybody put your hands in the air. Just like stretch a little bit. We all need it. Okay, all right, we're ready for this. So, type-safe React Native with ReasonML. I'm Jared Forsyth. I work at Khan Academy, which is an online learning nonprofit. And I'm also one of the co-hosts of the Reason Town podcast. So if after this you're excited about Reason, check out the podcast. We've got a bunch of fun episodes on there. And my goal with this talk is to get all of you to try out Reason. How many of you have written any Reason code before? Okay, actually, I'm surprised at how many that is. That's nice. So by the end of this talk, I hope all of you will go out and try it out, because I think it will change the way that you program. And the way I'm going to do this, first, I'll talk about why it's interesting to have Reason and React Native together, and then how to try it out yourself, and then some key differences from JavaScript, some things that might surprise you and might trip you up. And finally, I'll talk about the glorious future of Reason with React Native. And the link to the slides is at the bottom if any of you want to go back. And my Twitter handle is @JaredForsyth. Okay, so first, what is Reason? Yesterday there was a talk by Cristiano about Reason. Basically, in sum, it is a thin layer over OCaml, which is this 20-year-old language that is very battle-tested but has had a really small community. So Reason is trying to take OCaml, bring it to the JavaScript community, basically. There's a syntax that'll be more accessible to you. We're working a lot on community building, documentation. The first ReasonConf was last week in Vienna. I went to it. It was awesome. And there's a real emphasis on the beginner experience, making it easy for someone who doesn't have any background in OCaml or Haskell or any of these functional languages. And hopefully you should just be able to get started without too many hiccups. If you do try it out and you run into roadblocks, join us on our Discord channel and we'll try and make it better. And of course, it compiles to JavaScript, with an emphasis on the readable part. There are many compiled to JavaScript languages where you look at the JavaScript that comes out and it's like, oh, you know, I can't even start with that. But there's been a big emphasis on making it so that you can read the JavaScript that comes out, and sometimes it's the same as if you had written it yourself. So why should you be interested in Reason and React Native? To dig into this, I'm going to start with JavaScript and OCaml. And this is, we've got the USS JavaScript and the USS OCaml. Clearly, the JavaScript is much more fun, right? There's a party going on, there's fireworks, there's pie in the window if you can see it right there. There's a ping pong table. Like, this is a happening place. OCaml, much more boring, right? It's gray, like not really much going on. But in this picture, I'm hiding the most important part of a ship, and that is the hull. And you can see that JavaScript has some things going on. Right? There's some holes, there's some cracks, there's some patches, and JavaScript has some language features that were tacked on, kind of built over time, and really will bite you in production. Right? JavaScript is really nice to get started, but once you have a larger app, once you're maintaining something over time, it's like, ooh, I really wish we could fix this. And this isn't to say that you'll sink with JavaScript, right? There are some things that we can do when you're taking on water to pump it back out again, right? That's like ESLint to catch the places where you have an undefined variable, and to lint against some of the weirder JavaScript practices. But you need a lot of these once you get bigger in order to keep from sinking, and it'll slow you down a lot. Whereas, whoa, with that loading spinner, here we go. But this isn't the only way to make JavaScript a little bit more seaworthy, right? You can use TypeScript or Flow, and that will patch up JavaScript with a solid type system that will give you a lot more guarantees. It doesn't take you all the way there because you still have the JavaScript semantics underneath, and you can very easily bail out and do dangerous things. With OCaml, we take reason as a layer on top of it, and you still have the sound underneath. You still have the same rock-solid type system that people have been depending on for decades, but we add a little bit more friendliness, a little bit more documentation, that kind of thing. And my thesis is it's easier to start with a sound ship and add some party to it than it is to start with a sinking ship and try and patch up the holes. A more bland way of describing this is with this chart where JavaScript is really easy to use, but very low on the safety side of things. And Flow and TypeScript try to bring it more towards safety, whereas Reason takes OCaml that's already much safer and just adds some ease of use without compromising on any of the safety. So hopefully that's a compelling argument to you, right? We want our large production apps to have fewer errors. But I think the best argument for Reason is that it is the best way to write React. And this might seem like a pretty wild claim to you because it's React.js, right? This is a JavaScript library. How could it be that a language that is not JavaScript compiling to JavaScript would be better than just using the language that the library was written in initially? And it turns out React was not initially written in JavaScript. When Jordan Walk was prototyping it, he used standard ML, which is a cousin to OCaml. And so actually, a lot of the core concepts of React feel a little foreign in JavaScript. Feel like they're not completely at home. Things like immutability, right? In the React community, we know, oh, don't modify state directly. Don't modify the props you get. Wow, that will really mess you up. And so we have conventions. You can lint against it. But it's still, you can mutate anything you want in JavaScript. Whereas in Reason, it's just baked into the language. It's there from the get-go. The second thing is types, right? When React was first released, it came with prop types. So a runtime type system to try and give some amount of safety, some amount of guarantees about the relationships between components. And that was much better than anything that we'd had at the time, but it's still a tacked-on system. Now it's been kind of deprecated in favor of Flow and TypeScript. Whereas in Reason, again, you just get it from the get-go. You have all the safety and peace of mind that types give you along with your React components. And Jordan Walk, who started React and also started Reason, says Reason is JavaScript the good parts, plus some better parts. And if you can read the fine print, there's also some occasionally annoying but stabilizing parts. This is a newer technology, a newer community, and some of the rough edges around tooling and stuff we're still working on smoothing them out. So the focuses of Reason are ease of use and type inference, where in Flow or TypeScript, you have to annotate the functions of everything you export, right? And so you're writing a lot of types. With Reason and OCaml, almost every type can be inferred for you. So you don't actually have the burden of writing all the type annotations, maintaining them when you change something. It's all nearly magicked away. But then when you do something illegal, when you have an actual type error, it will fail to compile, and it'll tell you in a very nice way how to fix it. And then we also want safety and maintainability, especially for your large applications, and stability. With TypeScript and Flow, there's a new version that comes out every month, and that often contains breaking changes to the type system, which can, at Khan Academy, we use Flow on our web app and in React Native, and it can be quite a burden to upgrade to a new type system almost every couple of months. With Reason, the type system's been baked. It has been trusted, and you can depend on it not changing a lot. So I also want to say, why not Reason, right? There are some reasons to use alternatives, and I want to be real about that, right? I'm not saying everything is sunshine and roses. If you need a large community, lots of blog post documentation, JavaScript, TypeScript have that. The number of Stack Overflow questions that are tagged TypeScript are 50,000. And maybe that means that a lot of people have a lot of problems with TypeScript, but I take that to mean there are a lot of people using it. With Reason and OCaml combined, it's about 1,000. Now, you might see Reason and you think, I want to go all in on safety. I want to have the purest of type systems, and Elm will do that for you actually better than Reason does. Reason makes some compromises on the eventual safety in order to make some things a little bit smoother, a little bit easier to write. For example, with immutability, there is an escape hatch. You can write mutable code. It's harder to do. There's more complex syntax because you shouldn't be reaching for it all the time. But sometimes there are algorithms that just write better in the imperative style. If you want to stay completely away from that, Elm could be something that you want to check out. So how to try it out? Hopefully that was a compelling argument for using Reason with your React and React Native. And there are a couple of different options for you getting started. For the past couple of weeks, I've been working on a playground that is online. You can try out Reason. There's an editor on the left. Hopefully that is coming through on some of those monitors. And a display panel on the right. So when you evaluate, it will mount your React component. You can look at the generated JavaScript to see what's going on under the hood. And you can change the code and recompile. There's also, as you type, function completion and dot comments that are exposed to you. So all of the niceties of an IDE, but just in your browser, so you can immediately get started, explore the Reason React API, and try that out. You can also search through the generated documentation in the top right. So that's cool for Reason React on the web, but what about React Native? How many have heard of Expo Snack? Oh, there should be so many more hands up. This is an awesome service, right? It is a browser-based editor that will then compile and go live to your phone. Right, you download their app, you connect it up, and you can try out various React Native things, and it's live on your phone. It is amazing. And a couple of weeks ago, I found out that they have an open SDK, so that you can write custom editors on top. And of course, I had to try making the Reason playground work with Snack, and I did get it to work. So at reasonsnack.surge.sh, you can put in the device ID of your app. You can connect that up, and then evaluate Reason React Native code and try it out with all the niceties of function completion, documentation, and so forth. So that is super fun. One more thing. We heard about Code Sandbox earlier. And I met Yves yesterday in the speakers lounge, and we just had to get started on Code Sandbox and Reason. It's not done yet, but it is really close. So you try out Reason in one of the online sandboxes. You play around with it. You think, oh, this is cool. I have a React Native application. How do I add it? How do I try out Reason? Do I have to convert everything at once? And we've tried really hard to make it so that you can just add in a little bit of Reason, sprinkle it in to your project for a single component or for some core business logic that you want to be really locked down. And so there are just a couple of NPM libraries that you install. You make a config file, you compile, run the compiler, and then all of your .re files are turned into .js files in the same directory that they were. So your existing JavaScript can just require it or import it, and it doesn't know the difference. It doesn't know that this came from Reason. It might as well have come from JavaScript. And so if you're writing a Reason React Native component in JavaScript, in Reason, and you want to use it from JavaScript, let's take a look at an example for that. This is a basic component. You create a stateless component. This won't have any state. We have our make function, which defines what the props are. So currently, we're just taking a name prop, and then we're going to ignore the children. We won't do anything with it. And then we have JSX, what you're familiar with a couple of extra features that make it nice. So here we are making our React Native style definition and just doing a text node that will say hello. And to export that, we make a wrap reason for JS call where you take the JavaScript props that will come to you as just a mixed bag of untyped values, and then you call the make function. We're just grabbing out the name property right here. And that's it. Now from JavaScript, you can import it, use it as a React component, and you're done. Let's talk about some key differences from JavaScript. Right, the syntax looks very similar. We've worked hard on that to make it so you don't have to stumble over a different syntax. You don't have to stumble over a different JSX. It's very similar. But there are some differences that you'll want to watch out for. The first thing that stood out to me was there's no explicit require. There's no import statement. All of the modules, all of the files that you define in your project are available to other files. This will not be foreign to you if you're using Java or if you're familiar with Swift. But from JavaScript, it feels weird. It's like, oh, I don't have explicit imports at the top. I don't have explicit exports. And so an example here, if we're in something.re, we do let x equals 10. In this other thing.re, we just reference it as something.x. And it turns out this actually scales fine to larger projects. And I haven't seen it be a real blocker in the long run. Another thing that could trip you up if you're used to JavaScript is immutability, right? Lists are immutable. Instead of shifting something into the front of a list, you just spread the list after it. And the list implementation in Reason is a linked list. So it's easy to add from the head or take off of the head, but it's harder to add something to the end, which lends itself really well to functional style programming. There are also some ways that JavaScript is still better, and we're working on these. But for example, the size of the community I mentioned earlier, also package availability, right? As a small community, there aren't as many packages. This is okay, actually, because it's easy to write just the wrapper code that you need to use the Firebase NPM library or anything like that. So this isn't a huge barrier, but it would be nice to have everything just already wrapped for you. Also, making the bindings could be nicer. There's a project that someone in the community is working on to generate reason bindings from your flow types or from your TypeScript and just make that a non-issue. Also, async await. Some people come in and they're like, oh, I wish I had this syntax sugar. And we're working on bringing that into the reason syntax, but we haven't done it yet. So for now, you do promise.then, and it works all right. So now the stuff I'm really excited about. And I warn you, this is all hype, mostly hype. So first, let's talk about Reason Apollo. If you liked Peggy's talk, and we've got some slides issues here. Let's try that again. Okay, let's try that. So Reason Apollo. Peggy gave an awesome talk about how Apollo is working with the future of React and just bringing you along with the Suspense API. And we wanted the goodness of Apollo in our Reason React components. And so someone in the community is making a wrapper that is really cool because you get all of the type safety in your queries. So this is what it looks like to write a Reason Apollo query. You just have the GraphQL query like normal, but it knows about the schema of your server. And so it can match those up. And if you write a query that's invalid, that is querying something that doesn't exist on the server, you get a compiler error with a really nice hint about, hey, these are the only attributes that you're allowed to query for. So you get type-checked queries, and when you're writing your render function and you're using the data that you got back, that is also type-checked. So for example, if we say, let's get the name out of the book, it will say, hey, there's no name, there's title. Maybe that was what you wanted. This is so nice to have the compiler have your back when you're writing queries against your backend. So now let's talk about Reason Superpower. And this is the reason that I got interested in Reason initially, because there are a lot of compiled JavaScript languages, right? And some of them have types. But Reason is not just a compiled to JavaScript language. It has cross-compilation. And so you can target the web, you can target desktop, and soon you'll be able to target iOS and Android with ease. I've already made a game in Reason that I shipped on the Android Play Store and the iOS App Store, 100% Reason, and then compiled to native. And so I want to bring this to React Native. Right? Let's talk about really native React Native. React Native is cool. You're writing your code once, and it works on Android and iOS. But the current architecture is you've got JavaScript in the middle, and then React Native Objective-C on the left, React Native Android on the right, and they talk to JavaScript through these little telephone wires, right? It's in a separate thread, and it's talking to the JavaScript VM, so you have to serialize and deserialize on both ends. And that is a real runtime perf cost. So there are some things where it's like, oh, I can't do this because of the round trip cost. I guess I have to write it in Objective-C. I have to write it in Java. And if you want to wrap a native thing, then that's also a reason to write some custom native code. But this could totally be better. With a potential really native React Native architecture, we have OCaml, so Reason compiled to native code in the middle that talks directly to Objective-C and Java. So in the same thread, much lower translation cost than you get with JavaScript. And then when you want to write your custom Objective-C, your custom Java, it's also just right across the bridge, much lower translation cost than currently. And so I was making this slide, and I had this vision of the really native React Native gorilla. I hope you like it. So, like I said, this is mostly hype. There are a couple of projects that the community is working on to bring Reason as a really native React Native library that will compile to iOS and Android. Stay tuned for that, but thank you very much.